It's the Friday Feels, and we're back with your first sip of the weekend. You're now tuned in to this week's episode of Your Happy Hour. I'm your host, Nicole Carmine, and it's amazing to have you here, joining me this week as we uncover the truths about being a human and a working professional. What are you up to this Friday? Well, whatever it is, this moment is just for you. And we're back with another episode on the Feels podcast, the Your Happy Hour series. And we're still talking about the theme, the surprise of self-care this June. And it's also our very last month of the season. So we're going out with a bang. And I'm very happy that today I get to speak to a really dear old friend that I haven't spoken to in a long time on this topic and on the journey of life. And so a really big welcome to you, James, to the Feels podcast. And the last time I saw you, we were in the same city, New York City, and you're still living there. So it's really wonderful to have you here today and chat more about your life and what the journey has been like.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really fun. Love what you're doing here.
Thank you. And so, tell us a little bit about what you do today, how you got to this place, and what the journey's been like for you.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I always think when we get that question, like, what do you do today? The reset is like age 18. What did you go to college to do? Or university? Which I think maybe overshadows how much else goes into what you do today and how you got here. But if you work backwards, like I currently live in New York City with my wife Laura, and we just had a kid. So young Bo is 3 months old, and we live in a 400 square foot apartment in the West Village in Manhattan. Like, it's a very different life from that which I might have expected to live, having grown up in Cape Town, South Africa, and studied finance and accounting. So I think there's lots of turns to life that results in us getting to where we are. And I think so many people are always like, you're in exactly the place you're supposed to be. And I'm always like, no, I'm just in a place, making the most of what's in front of me. And yeah, it's really random how I ended up here. I mean, we met studying finance undergrads in like 2008. So like, I guess that's a pretty good kind of departure as to how I got here. Was studied finance and accounting, which were not things I ever should have studied. And did a master's degree after that in finance, but in behavioral finance. And I was like, wow, like the psychology is fascinating. And then went through, like, became a chartered accountant, and worked in consulting, and then in private equity, and ended up in wealth management, and was always fascinated by the human side of it all. And the principle of, like, how do you live a good life? And I think that was hinged around, my mom died young. She was 52. And I always think about, like, she had such a full, good life, but in many ways she was lucky. It just kind of happened that way. And I've always been very intentional about, like, well, if that did happen to me, I'd rather, I was very intentional about having built a good life, regardless of how long it was. So I went back to university and studied positive psychology, which is basically the science of well-being, and had no idea what I was going to do with that. And ended up back in wealth management because of this fascinating overlap between money and well-being. And all the while went through this journey of getting married to an American and moving to New York City and trying to discover who I am in this crazy metropolis. And yeah, loads of kind of elements of origin that all come together in this 400 square foot apartment, which is really fun.
I love that. Yeah. And it's so interesting to me how we both studied finance, but we both ended up doing more like human artistic things. Yeah. And also I really love that you, like, I feel like you're one of those people who've allowed yourself to change with grace, because a lot of people get really stuck. And I think this is kind of where the self-care comes in. It's like we don't really care enough for ourselves and look after ourselves enough to allow ourselves to adapt and change. And like you're saying, being in a place, allowing yourself to be just where you are, and that's okay. Like, that doesn't mean it's where you're going to be tomorrow, but Yeah, I mean, what does it look like for you when you think of like the
Yeah,
theme?
I think maybe why we both studied finance was because we came from a very A, risk averse, but maybe B, like opportunity constrained environment. Like it wasn't, like I was, someone was just in my apartment. They're like, oh, like that's such a cool portrait. And I was like, oh, my grandmother did that. And like my grandmother was like this artist. And then my uncle is this like now kind of famous artist who's like painting huge famous people around the world. And it's like that opportunity didn't really exist where we grew up in many ways. Like it wasn't like go be an artist. It was like, no, get a job in finance because there are only so many jobs and those are the ones that there are an abundance of and you need a job to feed yourself. And then, the self-care thing is much less important or even like your autonomy to live the life you want to live is so much less important in that context, in a very risk-averse, constrained context. But then when step back and when you live life a little bit more with a bit more autonomy when you get older and you get away from that narrative of like constraint and risk aversion and the like, you then discover, oh, there's a me behind that. And I discovered that through travel was, I finished my chartered accountant articles at the age of whatever it is, 25, and moved to Europe and lived in Amsterdam for 6 months and then came to New York actually for a month and did a road trip from New York to Patagonia over 8 months. And when I stepped out of that rat race or perceived rat race, I mean, it wasn't real. It was like a construct. When I stepped out of it, I realized how important the kind of personal journey of life actually was and how looking after yourself allows you to give more through your life. It's like you fill up your own cup. And yeah, I think that's become a really important theme. I really want to give a lot, but you also need to look after yourself to be able to give.
Episode topics that I really want to talk about a lot more is this fill your cup first concept. So maybe we should title this one that because I completely agree. And I think maybe as South Africans, we're also not taught to do that as well, as you might see in other places in the world. But that's something you have to discover for yourself. And maybe travel is that. Maybe being able to know that when you're traveling on your own, it's like it's you and you look after you in that moment. And you don't really always have someone looking after, like watching your back, or, you can't necessarily completely lose yourself in a night out because, you still have to get home. So, but I love that you did that for yourself, that you went and found the me. Yeah, I mean, we always talk about like on the fields, what does your fields life look like? What does that mean to you when you stepping into your feels life? And someone asked me recently, like, so what is the feels life? And I was like, well, what is it for you? What does it look like for you? So what does that look like for you? Do you feel like you've built that for yourself and what you've done?
Yeah, I think it's always in construction because it's always within this veil of sustainability. I think there's always this overarching theme of like, can you actually be that person in reality? And maybe that's the risk aversion that comes from growing up in a very small place. There wasn't exactly abundance around us, and there was not that perspective of like you were kind of like we were kind of irrelevant in the story of sustainability within the concept, within the construct of South Africa. I think interestingly, hearing you talk about that, filling up your own cup, for example, moving to the US has been quite shocking because the narrative is so upside down here in reverse to what we're used to. It's like, well, it's me, 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 without the objective of actually giving back to. And there's this symbiosis that is about collaboration and about giving that creates a good environment around us. And if your cup's empty, you can't partake. But if your cup is sealed, you also can't partake. And there's this element of like filling up to give. And from a positive psychology perspective, giving is one of the most fundamental elements of well-being. And so it's all in there. Like you got to look after yourself, but it does need to be with the intended outcome of some degree of like participating in a society and giving back something. Does that even vaguely make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think like naturally when you're feeling good and full, you run over, like you flow over with energy that you want to spill into the world. So I've never really thought about it like that, but I mean, it makes sense. Like I think we raised in a way to say like it was almost like loving from the outside in. But when you love from the inside out, like it's just a different kind of energy. You actually have
Yeah.
so much more to give the world, and you want to because you have enough of it, And so
there's a positive psychology professor, her name's Barbara Fredrickson, and she wrote a theory called broaden and build. And the idea was when you build positive psychological resources, which ultimately means like, being happy, you do two things. Like you build resources against negativity. So when bumpy road does eventually come across, you're not debilitated by it. You're able to, constructively approach it and work through whatever complexities have come into your life. That's the building of resources. But the broadening is about broadening your aperture, and it's about seeing more opportunities. When you come from a good place, that inside out mentality of if you're happy and well and are like feeling robust, you see things in a much broader opportunistic lens, and that is so much more constructive for everyone. It's like, oh, suddenly you can be creative and you can solve problems and you can help people and you can give freely without fear of running out of those resources. So it really is rooted in abundance, but it takes so much intentionality to build those resources in the first place. And I don't know if we're taught that enough in, risk-averse environments.
No, we're not. And I think that's where it's interesting that you actually did finance and went back into wealth, because so much of, like, I just hear you using the word resources and immediately my mind is going to like money, and financial resources. And actually it's not just that. It's like, what is your whole energy bubble of resources that you have? Mm-hmm. But naturally in the world that we live in, you do need the financial sustainability to feel it. I mean, it's like Maslow's pyramid. You have to feel safe, and then you can be creative. But what did that look like for you when you brought those two worlds together? Like, what was the most profound thing that you might have learned?
Yeah, I think, going back to the theory, I always try and ground my experience in theory because I always think I'm such a small data point. But the theory of well-being as relates to financial security was largely disputed for a long time. Daniel Kahneman, who's the guy who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, and he's a Nobel laureate, and he was like the father of behavioral economics, which became behavioral finance, which became the finance of well-being. He released a paper, I think it was in 2010, that basically said after a certain level of income, once those needs are met, the correlation between wealth and well-being falls away. So if you think it through a Maslow's hierarchy lens, once you have security and once you have, food and your shelter, you're good. Like that's all you need. Now it's up to you to go and find well-being. And that was the prevailing thought as relates to wealth and well-being. And then in, I think, 2022, a guy called Matt Killingsworth at University of Pennsylvania came out and said he used smartphones to measure well-being in moments rather than at a point in time. So you get a notification multiple times a day, say, how do you feel right now? What are you doing? And you correlate that with a whole bunch of metrics. And he was able to run this really robust, thousands, if not millions of data points of what is driving well-being. But one of the things he dug into was how wealth correlated with well-being. And what he found was, yes, the strong positive correlation to the kind of base level of Maslow's hierarchy, it still exists in line with what Kahneman said, but it doesn't fall away at a certain level. And that level in the US was, I think, an annual income of $75,000. They were once you earn $76,000, there's no positive return. He found a very positive return, and that was that wealth allows you to spend money on a good life. We are both travelers. You can't travel without having money. It's not, not really an option. Or at least you can't travel in a way that fits into the way our world is structured. Of course you can travel with no money. I'm sure you've hitchhiked at some point. I hitchhiked through Patagonia. It was great, but I had loads of time on my hands, and you sit with your thumb out for half the day because people aren't inclined to pick up a sort of bearded, shaggy man on the side of the street. But that is possible. But in reality, if you want to do lots of things in your life, you've got to fall within this construct of a capitalistic society, and wealth plays such an important role there. And it's not wealth for wealth's end, it's wealth to be invested in doing things you love doing. And so when I started putting those two together, it was really like a penny dropping of, oh, this is almost like the next evolution of capitalism. And so much of our world in which we live in these big cities is just like consume. It's like advertising, and you open Instagram and they're trying to sell you something, and everything's about sales. And this is about the reverse of that, being like, what do I want? Not what do they want me to want? And it's really fun helping people build lives in line with their values, in line with what they really want, but empowered by wealth and empowered by a strong financial foundation.
And I feel like it's like talking to where I am in my life at the moment as an artist, as building businesses, as an entrepreneur. Recently, I've been kind of looking for more like part-time jobs, and it took me a long time to be like, it's okay, I can go find financial stability in this so that I can finance my art and my music. And it's okay sometimes, like if you're still on the journey to say that I need to build foundation of wealth to be able to build into the well-being that I need and to feel fulfilled in my life. And it is like, it's a mix between what's happening in society and what's going on in yourself and your own journey. And you have to see the holistic picture for what it is. So I love that. And I also, I really do believe wealth is just energy. Like we came up with cash, and obviously that's the way we transact in the world, but it's just your energy. It's just a different way of transacting,
100%.
So we are controlled by it in some way. Unfortunately, in the world, maybe that will collapse. But it's just being able to come back to, like, again, like you said, like cultivating that. What is the energy bubble? What is the life that you want to live, and go from the center out? What was that like for you? Did you do that exercise and go like, these are my values?
Yeah, it's an ongoing exercise. I don't think you ever figured it out, because I think we all have anxieties that anxiety, I think, is like a latent reality, and it latches on to things in your life. You can have a perfect life, and if you're an anxious person, you'll find something to be anxious about. And so there's always a layer of anxiety, I think, that everyone carries with them at all times. And a lot of my anxiety is latched onto financial security. I live in New York City. It's most often rated the most expensive city in the world. There's always a random city that seems to like pip it at the top, but like New York City is always second. And it's a vulnerable place to live. I mean, you lived here, you know how that feels. You like go out for dinner and you're like, what did I just pay for dinner? Was it that good? And there's a bit of insecurity that comes from that. So a lot of the work that I do is to try and like liberate myself from that using data, like looking at, you run simulations what the future would be, and you're like, oh, I'm fine. And then it's like this weight released, and like, oh, I can go and pursue things. Like I can, do stuff, go like pursue experiences. A good example is, this will resonate with you. South Africa is playing New Zealand rugby in Baltimore, Maryland. So Baltimore's like 4 hours away. How random. To live in New York City and suddenly there's like a rugby game. And I'm not a massive like rugby guy, but it's so much fun, and it's so much part of our heritage and who we are. And so I'm going with a friend, and the tickets were insane. Like the dollar price of the tickets is what we would have paid in rand in South Africa, which means it's whatever the dollar rand exchange rate is times the price. So like, I don't know, 16, 17 times the price. I mean, it's nuts. But you've got to step back and look at it and go, this is going to be like, pursuit of experience is so much of what life is, and diversity of experience. And you're adding to that kind of memory bank. The data is the only thing that could help me feel secure enough to spend a crazy amount of money or something like that. And it does. Makes you feel great. You're like, oh, that's fine. That fits within the plan. It's all good. And, that's why I, in a work sense, put up with things I don't necessarily want to put up with, which is similar to the almost like contracting roles or the part-time gigs. Is like, we feel like a sellout against our core beliefs, but really it's just facilitating things. It's enabling you to do what you want to do and what you need to do. And I love that interaction. It links back into that self-care principle of you've got to spend resources, not necessarily money, but resources on self-care, time, energy, attention. And it's hard to do if we allow ourselves to feel in a resource scarce environment. So creating a feeling of abundance is really important. And the financial work to create a feeling of abundance is a lot.
It's really important. Yeah, it's such a big part of playing the game of life, I think, and the way it's structured. And maybe tomorrow things change and the world looks different and the game of life looks different. But it's also kind of owning, I've realized, like, I came here to be a human, to be in this life in this way. And yeah, maybe we're also here to change things in some way, but along the way you still have to eat and work within the constructs of what has existed. And so I think often maybe for myself, bits of self-care has been just acceptance of yourself, of your journey, and having grace in the process, So, yeah.
I don't know who wrote it, but I think it's the guys at the Stanford Design Lab. They spoke about gravity problems. They're like, if you wake up in the morning and you're angry at gravity, you've picked the wrong fight. You're not going to beat it. Like, you've got to accept that gravity is a reality. And it feels, the 24 hours in a day is a gravity problem, for example. Like, it's just, and the need to sleep is a gravity problem. And the need to eat is a gravity problem. And the need to be able to afford rent and pay for the food and, allow you to be able to sleep is also a gravity problem, which is financially oriented. Like, these are the constructs in which we exist. And so acceptance of them, I love that. It's just so fundamental to being able to really kind of squeeze the juice out of what's left within that construct. And that's what life is. I think life's just a big story that we're putting together, and how we make the most of what we have in building that story is what we'll measure our lives by, when we look back in the future.
That's like a beautiful gem to take away for the week. Thank you. And on that, I actually want to do a little segment called The Gems. And it's like a moment to say, in this last week, what did you feel gratitude for? Or is there something that you learned specifically? And for me, I just moved apartment into a new space into Paris, which has been so nice. And just being able to have gratitude for that, and being able to step out and know that I don't have to transport really far to get anywhere. It feels like a whole new chapter that's opened up. And I also had a really interesting situation where I was being a model for a hairdressing friend who's working on his exam, and I was there for his exam, and then the timer wasn't working, and I don't know, I walked out there with different colors in my hair. And talking about acceptance, it's just like he's fixed it now. But it's just the fact that you get to experience life and people's journey with them, and knowing that it's all okay. It's like it's going to turn out fine, And so that was really just big gems for me this week. It's like gratitude and acceptance and new spaces and things. And what about for you?
Yeah, I think the big one was, it's been a stressful week, and that's acceptance that's okay is a big thing. It's okay that a week can be stressful. Every week shouldn't be stressful, but every now and then there is one. But I think a big one was, I get very wrapped up in whatever I'm doing. My wife tends to say I'm like a black hole of concentration. I just get wrapped up in something, and she's like, all the energy has flown to you, share it with the world. Because I'm very focused and I'm very involved, and I look up and I've lost an hour and a half, and I'm like, wow, that on one hand, amazing flow state, on the other hand, slightly dysfunctional. And, I carry that stress with me. I'm always thinking and always doing. And there's been this incredible grounding in getting home and just picking up Bo, my son, and just being like, oh, oh, it's so simple. What are all those worries? And this grounding in just the moment. And it's impossible to feel stressed around new life. I don't know. I think a lot of people, it's funny, people have said that my wife and I are so relaxed as parents. And we're like, no, I just think we've done a lot of stressful things in our lives. So comparatively speaking, it is relaxed. but it's so grounding. And so this week has been, maybe because I've been asked that question a lot, like, what's it like being a parent? You're like, oh, it's great. Is the realization of like, that's really what matters right now. And there's always something that matters in life, and making sure you know what the thing is that matters allows us to have that perspective and enables us to step out of what is often a construct of stress. It's not real. And it's been really fun to have that this week.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, love is the only thing that's real, really. And the fact that you get to share it with a new human is amazing. I love it. Kids are amazing like that, really. They just bring you back to reality. And that's a really nice dream. Thank you for sharing that. And I also want to give a little bit of gratitude to our sponsors, our partners along the journey, and that is rss.com, who help us distribute this into the world, and also to Blender Bombs, which is in the US, and these nutritious snacks, and they've given our audience a beautiful discount. If you use the code TheFeels, you get 20% off. And also, lastly but not leastly, BNE Sim, Best Network Ever Sim, is a travel. Well, also you can use it natively. I use it every single day, and it's really affordable data. But they also have wonderful eSIMs that you can hop around easily in the world and with connectivity. And they've also given our audience a discount. We'll keep that one a surprise. You can DM us on the socials on what that is. And feel free to share all your feels with us. We'd love to hear what you're feeling. I wonder what everyone's feeling and thinking about this topic. Maybe you need to go and sit down and write down your values and do a little bit of a heart mapping to what you are doing in your life now. But I also would love to give a little shout out to what we always say is a people, place, or space, the PPS, who does have the feels. And this week, I had a really beautiful experience with something I don't actually like doing is karaoke, because I am a singer, but I'm so perfectionistic that karaoke is just never quite the same experience. But we went as a group of friends to this thing called BAM karaoke in France, and like you book like a box, and you go in and you just have the best time, and 2.5 hours just go by. And I just want to give them a big shout out for what they've created. I think more people need to be singing, releasing, having fun together. And so we just love your feels, guys. Thank you for being you in the world. And then I just have one more question for you, James, and that is our reading list. It's called The Stack. And so I'm curious about what is in your stack. It could be a book that you've been eyeing and you haven't picked it up yet, or maybe one that you've read and like to recommend to our community.
That's really fun as a question. When you have a small child, you tend not to read a lot. I'm looking at my boys' reading list here. There's a lot of baby books. I'm actually reading. There was a series I read the trilogy of maybe a year ago, called the Red Rising series. It's absurd. It's not something I would ordinarily necessarily gravitate towards. It's kind of like futuristic dystopian sci-fi set on Mars, interplanetary, whatever. It's so much fun. And it's a trilogy that became 7 books.
Oh,
so it's not really a trilogy. But I'm reading the 4th book, and I think so often when we're very stressed and busy, we need something that can detach us from that reality. And yeah, the Red Rising books are a 10 out of 10. If you're looking for something that's just really fun, really philosophical, if you allow yourself to absorb the greater meaning of everything that they're exploring. And I've told so many people to read it, even though it's something I would never, it's not Socrates, Aristotle. I'm like, yeah, but you should read it, which is really fun.
I love that. Thank you for the recommendation. We're definitely going to be adding that to the stack, which is growing and growing. And all the guest recommendations are on the website if you want to go check out the books. And I love fantasy, so I'll definitely be adding that one to my list. That's also way too long, and I need to get to all of them. But thank you for recommending that, and just thank you for coming on and sharing so openly and honestly and with your heart. And it's just such a pleasure to see you again, even if it's remotely. I hope we can give each other hugs in person sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's super fun.
If you haven't just yet, follow Friday Feels on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. You can share with us all your feels this week by tagging us at fridayfeels.co. And you can also find the website at that handle. And now, as you ease into this weekend, take a moment. Celebrate who you've become, what you've overcome, and what is yet to come as you do the crazy and cool things that you do as the authentic you. You know, the truth about life and work is that it's hard, but the beauty is this global working experience that you're in, well, we earn it together. So keep connecting, empowering, and inspiring this week. And of course, keep it raw and real. Until next time.